All right, we're recording.
Okay, thank you. It is 1 PM on Monday, August, I don't know why that was August, but January 12th, 2026. And this is the meeting of the Land Use Review Board. I am Janet Hurley, the chair, and I'm going to ask members to introduce themselves.
Brooke Dingley, board member.
Kirsten Saltian, board member. Sarah Hutt. And online,
Alex Weinhagen, board member. Hello, everyone. Sorry I'm not there with you in person.
we are happy to not be exposed.
Right.
But we miss you, Alex. Okay, so any updates to the agenda from board members? Right, hearing none. Sarah?
I'd like to make a motion that the board needs to discuss personnel and staffing matters and have confidential attorney and client communications on these matters. And I move that the board enter executive session.
Okay,
Second.
thank you. Any discussion on that motion? Seeing and hearing none. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. And that is unanimous. So the board will exit the public meeting and enter into an executive session and then come back out for the remainder of our agenda after the conclusion of our executive session. Thank you. All right. Okay, we are back from executive session, where we discussed personnel matters. Alex should be joining us. There he is. Great. And I see we have Annette. Hi, Annette. Do you have any comments on non-agenda items? I'll come back to that. Next on the
Sorry,
agenda
I do
is-
not. It takes
Oh,
me a
there you
minute
are.
to turn my sound on, so sorry about that.
Okay,
Thanks for
that's-
asking. Bye.
Thank you. Operations, budget, and legislative updates. Alex, I'll just say that your asking for an update on the RTO was timely. I got an email from Doug Parnham, and he would like to get an update on where we stand. And so I'll be talking with him on Wednesday to let him know where we are in terms of our RTO planning. We're still waiting to hear on whether our enforcement officers could be reassigned to home duty stations, which is sort of like the domino that we need in order to finalize where people are going to be. I'll probably also talk to him about budget, and maybe he can be helpful in those regards. Maybe he can talk to HR and encourage a decision on that point for us. We'll see. We'll see. So if you have any concerns or thoughts or comments about RTO, share them with me before Wednesday at noon, I think is when he wants to meet with me. Legislative updates, Kirsten and Brooke and I and Pete all spoke with legislators on Thursday and Friday to give an overview of the Act 181 implementation. Brooke gave an overview of the appeals recommendations, and Kirsten an overview of the wood products manufacturing report and recommendations. And we have more meetings tomorrow. And I suspect, Senate Economic tomorrow. I suspect that House General will want to hear from us too. So there have been some, there has been a bill drafted. I don't know if it's been introduced.
I'm not sure whether it has or not. It appears on the website as, as introduced, but I'm not sure if they've actually run through it.
Right.
But I did speak with Ellen Ledge
You did?
Council. Yes, and she was happy that we would work on it together.
Right, because Brooke, I had read a very early version way before it was introduced, and it seemed fine, and Jenny reviewed it. And Brooke reviewed the latest version, and they've added some things that may be problematic. So Brooke is in touch with Ledge Council on that.
It's basically, they put some provision for discovery in there for request to produce. And so we're trying to replace that, up front with a pretrial order. Right. So, so I mentioned to her, I think discovery, we didn't really hit the nail on the head, and she was very appreciative and wanted to work with us. So.
For the record, Ellen Chakowski is wonderful.
Oh, she's great. She's great.
And then do you have, I think, Rachel, you gave us an update last week on budget, and we are still waiting to hear.
Nothing more.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, sorry, Alex, go ahead.
Two questions. One, are the topics for these additional legislative committee meetings? Senate Economic Development, you mentioned, possibly House General. Are they just Act 181 updates, or have the committees conveyed that they're looking for something more specific?
So the committee tomorrow, I think, is looking for the same thing that Brooke and I gave with Pete on Thursday to the joint environment and natural resources. So they want to hear specifically about appeals, but also a general update.
Because Alex, they have drafted a bill regarding appeals that would convert the LURB as we recommended to be the appellate body for Act 250. So that's what Jenny and I will be working with Ellen on in the near future to try to bring that draft consistent with the plan that we reported on from the appeals study.
I understand. I'm curious what the bill number is, if in fact it's been introduced. And I'm curious if it is, which committee is taking it on
I think
first?
it's tomorrow's committee. I think it's Senate Economic Development.
That's right.
Because Clarkson's name is on it.
Bill number, yeah.
Like 159 or 130, something like that.
Oh, okay.
139, 150.
There's S-133, an act relating to land use housing and brownfields.
No,
That was from last year.
It would be one introduced
Well-
this year. Should be brand new.
yeah, we'll find it, Alex,
Okay.
and get it out. Okay,
Yeah, I was
Um,
just, my point was gonna be, I'm curious about it, just so I can, track it myself, having done that for many years. But also, it would be, we can talk further about this offline, but it would be good to have, once you've done the intro, it would be good to have a separate offline conversation with the chair to find out whether that bill is gonna be taken up by the committee.
yeah,
That's all.
yeah, thanks. Kirsten,
So Alex, also related to your question, when we were in House Agriculture, Food and Forestry, they expressed an interest in hearing from us about the accessory on-farm business component of Tier 2 come mid-February, when we have promised a report to that,
yeah,
for that legislative Act 181 study requirement.
and that committee was very interested in the details of our recommendations from the wood products manufacturers report,
Yeah.
so.
Yeah, they may want to have us back in about that as well.
Yeah.
in a sense.
Yeah. Any more operations budget legislative from anybody? Nope. Okay. Then can we move on to further discussion of the regional plan pre-application process? We had begun discussing this last week, sort of taking a step back and looking at, the process overall from a higher level to sort of reassess, make sure that our pre-application guidance and our pre-application response template, so to speak, reflects what we think it needs to reflect. And I have sort of put forth that I think we need to understand that pre-application process is not a quasi-judicial process. It is a process by which the board is coordinating a conversation between the RPC, the board, and state agencies and others who have a stake in these regional plans, in particular, perhaps the future land use maps. It is this pre-application process. The importance of it is to get that conversation to be as thorough as possible, incorporate comments into that conversation so that when the RPCs go through that adoption process, they have heard from people across the board and can consider changes to their draft so that when it goes through their adoption process, they're not going to be surprised by last minute objections that we would then consider in that quasi-judicial process. And, the comments are not going to be the same as the objectors. The objectors are part of that quasi judicial process, and the board is obligated to address every objector comment in our findings. In the pre-application phase, we are collecting comments. We are not necessarily, as a board, obligated to address every single comment that we get. We are obligated to make sure that the regional planning commissions have access to those comments, but we don't have to review every single comment and make our own judgment of that comment. I think primarily what we want to do with our response is where we as a 5-member board see not discrepancies, what's the word I want? Not inconsistencies either, but set parts of a plan that do not meet, that don't appear to be up to snuff, that we need to say that, and we need to say why we think that. And that is a very important part of that response. But there could also be generally we could say, this appears to me, to comply with statute. And I think that's how we need to see those. And we don't want to be dictating in that response what they should be doing. We want to identify where there's a word that is not coming to mind that I really want to use, but where there is a hole, a shortcoming that, and why we think it's there, we explain that, and then it's their job to fix it. Or to argue that we are wrong and they haven't complied. They need to show us that at the further stage. So do others have?
I think this is a
Thoughts
new
to
process
share?
for all of us.
Yeah.
And I think that that's important to recognize. It's a new process for the RPCs. It's a new process for us. And so I like the idea of collaboration and letting them know areas that we're identifying for improvement, that they can provide some clarity, some greater detail, and not being as black or white, because this is a new process. It's not necessarily black or white. It's all shades of gray. And identifying areas that they can provide greater specificity, greater clarity, and also being as specific as we can with some of it, but at the same time, not necessarily passing judgment, because that's not that's the final application. And I think we'll get there together through it. So no, I would agree with those sentiments, Janet.
Kirsten.
So just to put maybe a bit of a finer point on it, if it's more advisory, then I think we would adjust some of the wording of how our current the conclusions, at least in a couple of the pre-application reviews, have been worded thus far. Some of it has been, doesn't appear to me, therefore the following is a required revision.
Mm-hmm.
And some of it is advisory. So I'm understanding the suggestion would be it would all be advisory.
Basically. It's our advisory opinion. Yeah. I think it is important, though, to be very clear when we see something that we think does not comport with statutory description, requirement, or standards, and explain why. I think that's the most important part of the response. And if we miss something, and it's not our fault, it's still the RPC still maintains the responsibility to show the burden. They have the burden of proof in that quasi judicial process. I hope we don't miss anything, but it could be that somebody comes along with some comment that we were like, wow, yeah, you are right. And you need to address that, right? But our hope is that that gets front loaded into this pre-application process.
Yes, I think that some of the requested revisions, required revisions, and advisory recommendations was sort of a continuum of, some of them were more substantive and clearly it was articulated, you know, had a direct nexus to the, call it, shortcoming that had been flagged, but other ones, it was less clear. And so I think we still need to just be mindful of making clear to the RPC and any other participants, like here's the ones that we're flagging as a specific shortcoming, and then here's some, you know, ways that you might address it if you think this is the correct approach.
Yeah, though,
But then
I think I'm advising that we not go into the ways that they could address it.
So not doing sort of a,
It's, yeah, not, you know,
so would we
letting
have,
them address it.
sure,
Yeah.
but would we have any advisory recommendations then?
I think that we could when there aren't too many options, right? I think, for instance, let's take a future land use map, and we're like, well, that doesn't necessarily qualify as a village for future land use. Or that doesn't necessarily qualify for tier 1B. Their only other options are, I mean, and it should be sort of self-evident in terms of like, maybe it's more of a hamlet or something of that nature. So I think in some cases we can be specific when we can say, it's not this, it's one of these three things. But I think it's worth saying it's one of these three things. It's not limiting that sort of approach, not limiting, just saying it's not this. You can give us some more information or reclassify it as one of these three other things.
Yeah, that's the map. Yeah,
Right.
but I think that we can still have advisory recommendations. We can say, yeah, I think, you know, this appears to meet statute, but I think it would benefit from X. I think we can say that still as an advisory recommendation. I just think the important part is that we identify the shortcoming, we identify why we see it as a shortcoming. That's what the RPCs are really gonna want from us. They may not care that we think that, you know, if you talked about this particular program that I know you have, I think it would be great, you know, they might not care, right?
It's up to them to design.
Yeah, yeah. There is another option though, and that is, and that we were sort of leaning on asking for more information because the board cannot make a determination. So first of all, I think we need to be careful about saying that we can't make a determination because we're not making a determination in the pre-application phase. I think we can say the board does need more information about X because we're not sure that it reflects what statute requires. And this is why we're not sure. So I think whenever we're asking for more information or wherever we are saying this doesn't cut it, that we are really clear about why we came to that conclusion. Or that assessment, I'll say at this point.
So like does not appear at this
Yeah,
juncture or.
right, or,
Yeah, okay.
or the board
That
just
makes
can't
sense.
tell because
Right.
you don't have enough information.
Based on the information provided, there's insufficient information. So if we're going to have maybe a little bit less specificity with respect to advisory recommendations, it would, to me, probably heighten the importance of the RPCs having some ability to come back in for the board and show us maybe some other if they want to, prior to coming back in with a full submittal, bring in some discrete sections that are critical, I think we should accommodate that.
Except that I don't want to give, it's still just advisory, and if they'd come in twice and we kind of say, yeah, I think so, like, it still doesn't guarantee anything. And so I would be careful, and I think, I've been thinking that it's better that that board designee communicate with that RPC if there are, until they come back in for that final. I mean, I don't know, Jenny, maybe that's something we can talk to you about in executive session, but I just want to be careful that before that final application is made, we are not making, you're not giving the impression that, well, if you do this, you're going to be fine, because we can't do that. So does that make sense, Kirsten?
Yeah, I mean, I think
Yeah.
that's fine. I think it's a valid.
So I don't know, I think initially, I don't know that it's a good idea for us to say the whole board would meet with the RPC in the interim, in some process that's not described in statute outside of that pre-application or that final application phase. But if it is that board designee, maybe that's okay. And we did get a memo from legal about conducting that kind of interaction with the applicants in the interim that I think is helpful, and being careful not
Right,
to,
there's a limit to. what
Right.
can occur.
right, so. Anything else on that this time around?
Alex.
Alex?
I just want to push back a little bit, Janet.
Yeah.
I think that the information and perspective we got from legal with regard to the board designee was that it's perfectly okay for them to do procedural clarifications with an applicant. But not to have substantive discussions about compliance or
Right.
even in my mind, to have substantive discussions about what the board meant when it provided this particular information as to why we had concerns.
Yeah,
Maybe a little bit of clarification, but if an RPC says, thank you for your feedback, and there are two things that we are particularly confused about with regard to the board's feedback, I would like there to be an opportunity for them to come back and see the entire board as part of the
yeah,
continuation
That's
of
a
the
good point.
pre-application process.
yeah, that's a good point, Alex. I think what I was responding to was having them come back to present something new in response to our,
Right.
but yeah, I think that's okay. And
Yeah,
maybe
and
we
and
can
like-
have some internal guidance for the board around these issues.
Well, and like Sarah
I
said
think
in a
it's-
prior meeting, I think as long as there are some guardrails in terms of how
Yeah.
often we would meet with with the RPCs after the pre-application feedback has been received, like
Yeah,
maybe just once. But,
Yeah.
unless they want to submit a completely new pre-application and start over. But
yeah, Yeah.
I don't want to shut the door on the board being able to have them come in and have a casual 30-minute conversation, and if that's going to help them
yeah,
get their final application together.
yeah, okay. Yeah,
Can I just add my thoughts on this, because I am very supportive of the notion if they need some more information or assistance, clarification. I think that's really important, and we should allow them to come back. But I do have a concern about notice in terms of like this process. And I think we do have to be careful, like, about prejudging things or creating a process instead of the other process. And then it's a notice issue that I'm just concerned about. So maybe we can just give a little bit of thought to that. Is there anyone, who would potentially become a party intervener? I've forgotten what the specific to
Well,
it.
in the, it's a objector,
Objector, right?
but there are groups that have requested notice.
Okay,
Like the NRC has requested notice for each of these so far, the pre-application notice. So I guess in that sense, if an RPC were to come back to ask the board, what the hell did you mean by this? Maybe we would notify
by
those entities that asked for notice.
Or that there were a number of state agencies, for instance, that submitted written comments. Like maybe the protocol would be to notify everyone who submitted pre-application comments if there's going to be continuing board review of an element of pre-application concerning that
So
plan.
this is what makes me a little bit uneasy, because I think, as I stated before, is I think there is offering guidance. And I like the idea of going back through the board designee, because if there's a way to provide guidance in a way that it is helpful to more RPCs in a general way of, this is the board's interpretation of this blue area or something of that nature. But where I get uncomfortable is where we're revisiting the pre-application, where we're making judgment again on a pre-application without necessarily having that application back before us. And so I'm not sure that we're going to get there. So I'd like to sort of like leave this a little bit open for the time being. And we can sort of see where we're there. But if we were getting into the area where we're almost revising our judgment on a pre-application, then absolutely, we should be notifying all those entities
Yeah.
again. But I think we should be careful around that.
I think if all we're doing is clarifying what the board meant in its written response, I'm okay with that. And I think that's what Alex meant to address, right? Alex, you're not saying that you think we should leave it open for an RPC to come back with some revisions and ask us, is this okay?
Correct. I'm talking about clarifications with regard to the feedback we provided.
So,
I
Is that-
could take it, you know, see how it comes in if there
Yeah.
are requests. I think you're right, Janet. It's like we have to limit what the decision or conversation is that I think dictates and would protect against like getting involved in some other.
some other process
Process that
that we have
requires
no authority to have, yeah, yeah.
Well, maybe legal can help advise us about how to do this in the way that the board wants to do more narrowly in terms of clarification of the original pre-application decision.
Let me write something up. And because I don't want to burden legal with this, I feel like legal needs to move on to tier 3 and HC and training of new staff attorney. And let's see how you feel about what I might write up and then where to go from there.
Sure.
We can certainly have an executive session
Yeah,
conversation.
instead of putting some, making you have a work product. Yeah,
Because we're not like needing to respond to any particular
we're not.
board now.
I mean, I did meet with Rutland briefly, as a follow-up.
Mhm.
I have not heard from Northwest.
Right. So you haven't heard from.
Nothing from
CCLCC. And I think in 10 days, we're gonna get Addison.
So let's not fix a problem that may not exist.
Right, right.
Do we have a plan for who's gonna be the board?
It's just called not it. So.
I think it's gonna be me and Brooke is gonna shadow.
Great.
I mean, if you all think that that makes sense, but,
Not to prejudge, but I think that makes sense.
okay.
That sounds
Brooke
great.
and I discussed that on Thursday.
Alex is seeing stuff.
Go ahead, Alex.
So another item with regard to the regional plan review, we had some discussion, substantive discussion about flood hazard areas and river corridors and what level of information needed to be provided or which future land use areas were appropriate with regard to those resource areas. Do we want to talk about that a little bit now? Legal gave us, their some advice on that, but I think the board was not all on the same page. So maybe it's premature and people need time to think about it some more, but I just thought if we have time today and people are willing, maybe we should iron that out.
I'd like to have a separate work session on that.
Okay,
Okay.
so I think we were gonna put this on our next meeting agenda discussion too, and we could specifically have people review what legal put together for us and be ready for a discussion at our next meeting on that topic. And, does that sound like a plan if people don't feel ready today? Any thoughts at all today? We do have 13 minutes left on this topic.
Yeah, I'm not ready for this. one.
Okay. Kirsten?
Yeah, I'm not.
Okay. Alex, any thoughts you want to share today on that?
No, if everyone wants some time to ponder it some more, that's fine. I'll just note that I think we may have had 3 board members on one page and one board member not, and one board member absent. That's my recollection of where it sort of shook out.
Wow, what a memory.
So yeah, we can talk more about it next time.
Okay.
But I just feel like we need to have that
Yeah.
discussion. I remember telling RPC people like we'll figure that out and we'll have better sense
Yeah.
of that later. So I don't want to forget it.
And the other things that we did discuss were walkability and presence of historic assets in some of the FLUs. So maybe revisit those 2 issues as well, and just be ready to provide clarity out there about all 3 of those issues next time we discuss this, and I think it's next week. We'll figure that out on Wednesday when we do our administrative agenda setting. Okay? Okay. Okay, we're early. On to the next, road construction jurisdiction discussion.
Sarah and I came up with a brief memo together. Sarah, you can take the lead on this conversation you want.
Sure. Although the memo is mostly yours, but I think as we sort of tested the waters with the board, the last meeting was how much of the road rule do you want to be involved with? Because there are some decision points. And I think the first decision point that we came to was in definitions and looking to clarify. And so I think memo sort of speaks for itself in terms of sort of the background. And there's a distinction between roads and driveways. And so we came up with basic definitions for road and driveway. Wanted the board to consider those. Road is fairly well defined in statute. I think we gave some statutory definitions. It's also defined in Title 19. We chose not to necessarily spell that all out here. But I think I'll just say the definition that we have as a road is defined in 10 VSA 6001, subsection 3, subsection A, subsection 12, and also means a constructed way that provides motorized access to more than one holder of real property or more than one leaseholder in their assigned guests or customers. A road is not a rec trail as defined in, and we cite 24 VSA 4303 subsection 37, nor a driveway is defined herein. So saying more clearly what a road is and what it is not. And then a driveway is a constructed way that provides motorized access to a single holder of real property rights or a single leaseholder for the primary use of the holder of these real property rights or that lease and their assigned guests or customers. A driveway is not a trail, and they're saying nor is a class 4 highway. And there are different flavors of this that are actually in statute. We tried to make this as simple and straightforward as possible. And just to sort of play this out, I think first of all, I'd like to thank Aaron Bronde, who took a first pass at cleaning this all up and refining it more to ownership. That is something that sort of is more a black and white issue, more clearly articulated. So a driveway that then has multiple ownership, multiple lots serves, it then can go over into the road issue.
It is, it looks like
From this
This
proposed
definition.
definition.
Yeah.
And there are, I think we went through, there are a variety of nuances that you can get into on this. This is more sort of the best clear-cut approach that we could give. And so we wanted to take the temperature of the board and see if this is an approach that you endorse or have questions on or want to have discussion about.
Yeah, and so we included the existing statutory definition of recreation trail, which is a corridor that is not paved and that is used for hiking, walking, bicycling, cross-country skiing, snowmobiling, all-terrain vehicle riding, horseback riding, and other similar recreational activity. So we're saying roads and driveways are not that, and that's an existing Title 24 definition.
And we
of
felt that that was
recreation trail.
important because trails can provide motorized rights of way, but they're specifically for recreation purposes.
What about paved recreation paths?
Paved recreation paths usually don't have motorized access for snowmobiles and ATVs. So that's a small, so there are some things that, as I said, there are a variety of things, but
Yeah, I mean, I don't think of a rec trail as a driveway or on the road.
Right, but
So
is somebody gonna interpret it as because it's paved and this definition says a rec trail is not paved?
Oh. Well, you know, and basically we're looking at this trails definition to say this is something that it's not, that what we're defining is not. It could also not be like the bike trail in Burlington, you know, near the lake. That's a rec trail. I think, you know, it sounds to me like the definition of trails was, you know, related more to the, you know, forestry,
Yeah.
forested areas
Okay.
where, you know, it wouldn't necessarily need to be. Like, I don't think the Lamoille Rail Trail is like paved in any
No,
location.
right, a lot of rail trails are not paved.
So I, you know, I think, okay, there are other things that what we're defining is also not, but I don't think we need to go through a whole necessary laundry list. But I do think what's important is the use of a driveway is to access the abode.
Yeah,
So
or business,
as opposed to,
Yeah.
oh, this is a recreational trail for recreation. You know?
right?
I think once it becomes an access to a home, then it becomes a driveway.
and this is the fundamental building block because it's 800 feet of road, 2,000 of road and driveway, or it could be 2,001 feet of driveway. And so it's, you need to sort of parse out what are all these different things. And then you can sort of build from there. So,
yeah, just to jog your memory from last week's conversation about some of the precedent concerning the old road rule that has filed within our e-notes, there was quite a bit of appeals concerning, you know, what's a road, and it was, you know, looking at the scope of construction, scope of improvements to discern if it was really a road or perhaps a long driveway. And people were doing things like building long, narrower road driveway, whatever you want to call it, with like pull-offs to better accommodate two-way travel, which perhaps would have been well suited to having a wider width of the traveled way as opposed to that kind of design approach. So it was, there was some added complexity around, again, differentiating between, what's a driveway, what's a road on the basis of that scope of construction. And this would, I think, eliminate that component of defining, road versus driveway by just basing it on ownership. Like how many owners does this feature provide access for?
Alex?
I think Kirsten's point is really good, and I appreciate that it will help solve some of those loopholes and ridiculous scenarios. So I like the more generalized language. A few comments. Motorized access seems antiquated to me. In my experience, these things are referred to as vehicular access rather than motorized. Semantics, perhaps. The concept of I think what we're really talking about here in this language is, does it serve one property or does it serve multiple properties? And if it serves one, it's a driveway, and if it serves more than one, it's a road, right? I don't know if we need to think about using the term principal access to a property to differentiate between other types of accesses that are not the principal access. So just something to think about. I don't really have an answer for that one. But again, in my experience at the municipal level, we would write definitions that referred to principal means of access to a property. Also,
Sorry, Alex, are you saying you would like the word principal added? Because it's not here.
I would like our team to ponder whether it should be referring
Okay.
to the principal means of access to a property as a way to further specify and be more specific in the definition. I don't have an answer to it. It's something I'm familiar with seeing in other definitions, and it's not here.
Okay.
And,
Before you go on, Alex? Yeah.
Yep.
Before you go on, Alex. So that's an important issue, I think, because I think we need what you're suggesting is there could be more than one access to a property. So should driveway be confined to there's only one access to an actual property, or any road that gets to that property, is that considered access to the property? So I think we do need to think about that.
Well,
Are we?
I can understand from the municipal side where you're talking about principal access and improvements in terms of wanting to make sure for emergency vehicle access and things of that nature. And also in terms of road construction, that the principal access supports and is so wide and what have you. But I think for these purposes, it's the cumulative effects. And that's why we're not saying principal access, because if you were to put in the loop, for instance, and you're only to count the first leg in as part of that and not the loop out, that all goes into that sort of fragmentation issue in terms of, and it should all be counted, I think, for the intent of the road rule. So I hear you, Alex. But I think that I'm not sure that we want to constrain ourselves by saying primary or principal or anything of that nature.
That's the thinking I was going to encourage you to do, and maybe you just did it live. Way to go. So
I
a
agree
couple
with
other
Sarah.
items. A couple other items. The Title 19, in their definition of highways, and then what's not included with regard to trails. It makes it very clear that forestry roads, they have different names for them in Title 19, managed roads or state forest highways and the like, that those are also not roads. And I wonder if we should be clear about that as well. If we're going to say a driveway is not a trail as defined in 24 VSA 4303, maybe we should be
Maybe we
saying
also
something
say-
about
So
that as
that-
well.
That's the sort of next step. So if I was to like say sort of the buckets that we need to be discussing with the road rule, there's another bucket about primarily used for ag and forestry. And when a road is not primarily used for those anymore, then it becomes jurisdictional. And so that's coming attractions, Alex, that's a good one. But yes, that's.
But if it's primarily used for, logging, say, but it also accesses to domiciles, it's a road.
So this is going to probably
Or
be
is it-
another conversation in our future meeting.
Yes.
This,
Or
we thought
beyond those
was,
two,
a good-
becomes.
this we thought was a good building block. We reserve the right to amend these definitions as we move forward, but this was sort of like a first shot across the bow of, can we get some sort of consensus as to what's a road and what's a driveway? And then we can get into these different flavors, particularly with forestry and ag.
Yep,
Yeah,
I'm
so
fine with that
just
as a
to-
conversation for a later date. I agree. It's complicated with that provision of the road rule.
Well, and this proposed definition of road does not incorporate the definition of roads, highways, et cetera, as found in Title 19. In part because that definition includes things like right-of-ways, which are not necessarily in and of themselves, constructed
Development,
roads.
right.
And so we didn't want to add that complexity factor as well. And I appreciate you mentioning the other forestry road component that I think is a little bit out of sync, but as Sarah says, topic for another meeting.
Sounds good.
I think there's a little. Yeah, one of these
Sorry.
definitions as written out actually says trail and the other one says recreation trail. I think we meant to have recreation trail in both places. I'm just noting that.
Okay.
Yeah,
The
I
driveway
would,
one just says trail.
Yeah.
I was working on trail definitions earlier today for tier 3 purposes, and the reference that I was given from Forest Parks and Recreation was not 24 VSA 4303. It was actually Title 10, Chapter 20, which is specific to trails. I think the definition is actually identical, so it probably doesn't
Oh,
matter,
okay.
but you might want to look at that chapter as it's specific to trails and such.
Which
I think we
chapter,
did.
Alex?
Title 10, Chapter 20.
I think
Okay.
we did, and this definition is a little bit, has greater specificity to it.
But we'll look at it, Alex.
Yes,
Thank
I
you.
think,
Okay.
yeah.
I think I had one other thought that I wanted to share. Yeah, I guess, again, I think the crux of this, like, there's a lot of language, but I think the crux of this to a layperson is you're telling me that if this access serves one property, it's a driveway, and if it serves more than one, it's a road. I don't have to measure it. I don't have to determine the depth of gravel, what level of construction. It's just how many properties does it serve and is it constructed? So from that standpoint, that simple standpoint, I just want to make sure that the various scenarios that I'm familiar with at the municipal level, like we are anticipating them, right? So how about an access that serves a duplex? How about an access that serves a single family home with an accessory apartment? How about an access that serves a 5-unit, a multi-unit building that's owned by one entity and it's a rental property? How would it be interpreted?
This is where the ownership issue makes it a little bit simpler, because let's take the single family home with the accessory dwelling unit, that's all owned by one entity. The duplex could be owned by one entity, but let's say that it's not. Let's say it's owned by 2 separate entities, but there's an association that owns the land. You could have that too with like 50 units where it's all owned by one property owner. And so those are private driveways because it's serving one entity. Now where you start to have areas where it's not is when you start to split up the ownership. So I think that's where it's not perfect. I don't think any of these definitions are perfect, but I think it gives the ability to treat parking lots for multi-unit buildings as being a driveway as opposed to a road.
So that's the answer to my question, is that it can be as many dwelling units as you like, as long as it's one property owner?
I don't think that's the way that was contemplated as this, that there's an element of this definition that I think goes to this question of, say, a 5-unit apartment building, and there's a lease held by a tenant.
Correct.
Single leaseholder, yeah.
Right, so this is saying, under the definition of road, it's a constructed way that provides motorized access to more than one holder of property rights, more than one owner, or more than one leaseholder assigns guest customers. So I think it would be interpreted, I think conceptually, that if you had a duplex or the 5-unit apartment building, that would be a road.
So I would just advocate that, to be consistent with recent legislative changes that require municipalities in particular and to look at duplexes the same way that they do single unit residential, and to look at ADUs without requiring any more than you would require for a
For a
single
single
unit.
family unit.
Yeah, and so I would recommend that we include allowances for duplexes and single family units to single
To add an
unit
ADU.
to have ADAs, and that be one considered
driveway.
one, driveway. But for, more than that, I think, okay, three to 5 and more
It becomes a road.
could be a road.
Because it makes sense in terms of the volume of the traffic and even the specs of the driveway versus road. Because if you have significantly more traffic, not a single family home or a duplex, you would have more vehicles and probably a better road versus a more minimal driveway.
The other thing is that E911 standards require a road name when you have more than 2 units. Doesn't matter what the ownership characterization is. If there are more than 2 units, you must name the road and assign E911 addresses to it.
So for a duplex or,
Duplex, you're all right,
duplex, you're all right.
Yeah.
You don't need to.
but 3 units is a road. So,
Gotcha.
so it's consistent with other statutory standards.
So do we want to change this in order to reflect all of that, or are these
That's what I'm
definitions
saying.
adequate?
I think we should do that for those 2 cases.
I think with ADUs, you're not going to have an issue because it's all ADUs. It's required to be all one property.
So on the statutory face, that is true, but a municipality could allow that it's not owner occupied. So the statute says that a municipality cannot be more restrictive, but it can be more liberal in terms of identifying what an ADU is.
Very
So-
familiar with.
So it could be under different ownership is what I'm suggesting, as long as it meets what that municipality is defining as an ADU, and as long as that definition comports with statute. So I think we can just say that, whether it's owner occupied or not, a single unit primary structure with an ADU is considered one, and a duplex is considered one.
Just note that Act 250 has its own definition of accessory dwelling unit as well
Oh, it
to be
does.
aware of, and that requires it to be owner occupied. So if it's not owner occupied, it doesn't fall under the Act 250 definition of accessory dwelling unit. It would just be 2 units.
So
I don't
I
want
think we
to, I
can
don't want to
change
get
that.
distracted by the ADU conversation. What I was trying to get to
Yeah.
is, is this a simple, if it's one, it's a driveway. If it's more than one, it's a road. And Sarah's answer at the front end was, no, it's not that simple. It can be 7. And with the right ownership pattern, it's a driveway. And what I'm saying after hearing the
Well,
conversation is maybe we
Kirsten's
want to
saying,
change
though, that
this
that's
to
what-
switch.
Yeah.
Yeah, and maybe
Well-
Sarah and I need to get back to the board.
Well, I think the key language is leaseholders, right? So if they're not leases, I think there's potential. So I think I think we want this to be sort of a board feedback session. I think this is going to be good input. I think we can address the ADU and duplex. And I think we can perhaps put a finer point on the question that Alex raised. I think for the, question about ADUs and duplex, maybe it's somewhere in that second sentence, some sort of refinement about what it is and what it is not.
Mhm.
But if you guys are in agreement that we can look at the ownership issue as being the defining, I think that gives us something to work with.
Yeah, and Sarah, I'm not sure I'm comfortable giving you the green light that ownership is in fact, the place to rest on this. I think in my mind, I'm tinkering with having it a little more nuanced and saying, for residential purposes, it is how many dwelling units there are with whatever exceptions you want to make for ADUs or duplexes. And for non-residential development, it's something else. In part so that we sync up with the E911 road naming, which is kind of a silly thing to base policy on, but everybody understands it and it's applied, across the state with some consistency. But also just because it's easy.
Some
It's easy for,
Yeah.
some.
it's easy for people to understand and count, right? Oh, it's principal dwelling units, with the exception of ADUs or duplexes. I've got 2 on a road, or I've got 3 on a road, and we don't have to get into who has a real property interest, are there any leases, or is it all done without leaseholders? That's all.
Right, because I was thinking, is that gonna get us caught up in trying to identify leases, versus ownership for multi-family or even leasehold commercial spaces?
There are usually transactions around that, though. I think, I don't want to necessarily try and sync up with the E911 standards for the state, because that's not applied unilaterally across all municipalities in the state of Vermont, is what my understanding of practice in that is. But I think there could be something in the definition of roads and driveways that looks at a unit count. I think that might be helpful.
Okay. Unit count instead of ownership leasehold.
I think it can be both.
Okay.
Because I think that sometimes you have leases too. You can get into with, different land uses, that I think that we should be cognizant of. So
Okay.
let's take a second stab at this, and bring it back. And I think the other thing to maybe a subsequent board meeting discuss is the primarily used for ag and forestry. That's another bucket that, as I said, I think these are going to be working definitions that we're probably going to revisit as we move forward with addressing some of these other specific individualized portions of the road rule. Alex.
Right.
Go ahead,
So
Al.
there's one other piece that's kind of significant in this memo at the top of page 2. The first sentence says the new definition triggers jurisdiction for roads over 800 feet in length, a combination of driveways and roads over 2,000 feet in length. And it's this last part that's kind of significant, or driveways over 2,000 feet in length. So I think, you know, intelligent people can read the Act 181 and interpret that differently because it uses the word associated driveways, not driveways without connection to a road. So Sarah and Kirsten, do you want to have some conversation right now about that question or save that for a later date as well?
No, I'm happy to have a conversation around that.
It seems like we should use the word associated driveways and roads to be consistent with
Right, but the
statute.
problem is that if we do that and there's no road, then are we saying that a 3,000-foot driveway is not jurisdictional under the road rule because it's a driveway that is not associated with any roads?
Oh, I see what
So
you're
what
saying.
this-
Yeah.
Dissociated.
So I'm happy to discuss it too. Sarah and I did meet with legal and have, put forward this interpretation of the statute. That is to mean that, a road over 800 feet, a driveway over 2,000 feet, or a combination of roads and driveways over 2,000 feet.
So if you have an existing road and somebody builds a new driveway that's 2,001 feet long, that is going to be jurisdictional. At least working off of this interpretation.
Mhm.
And I think that jibes with the intent, and it's more logical. But at the same time, are we going to be facing legal scrutiny or potentially having this flipped if somebody has an undeveloped lot with frontage on a town highway and they want to build a 2,500-foot driveway and they say, I'm looking at the statute and it says that jurisdiction shall not apply unless the length of all roads and any associated driveways in combination is greater than 2,000 feet. I don't have a road. Per your definition, all I have is a driveway. There is no road, so therefore, how can my driveway trigger it? It's not associated with a road. So Jenny, help me understand
So
like
it's
how we counter
associated
that.
with the project.
It's associated with the project. You also have a policy statement at the end of this about the purpose of the rule, is to avoid fragmentation. So if they're trying to interpret this to avoid if they're causing fragmentation in their interpretation of the rule, that would be disfavored in the judicial context. I mean, I think a road can be 0 plus associated driveways of 2001. I think providing guidance to people about predictability and that's what our intent is, gives people a warning and the ability to get out in front of the question.
And if you are connecting a driveway with a road, you are going to have to do something to the road to connect it.
True. Yeah.
So it could be 1 foot of improvement, but
Yeah,
there will
yeah.
be.
I have gotten snagged in apron conversations before.
Yeah, apron and a culvert.
But I see your point, Alex. Yeah, it does seem to presuppose that there is a road. And, and then it says, and the driveways. So does that mean just the driveways are good enough?
Yeah.
But I think if you got to connect, you have to do something to the road.
Yeah,
And that
I'm happy
combined
with that
with the
interpretation
intent.
and yeah, I'm happy with the interpretation. I think the guidance, as Jenny said, is important because people will think differently about this. And I just wanted us to have a conversation in the bright light of day about it and our justification for the interpretation we are coming up with. I wouldn't be surprised to see this challenged in court someday in the future based on the statutory construction.
I had the same question.
Is this one that we? Or
Yes,
we can.
we're doing
choose-
guidance now,
Right, but we,
and
and then we'll,
we do have we could do rules. We're not doing that right now. But we could in the future.
that's one way to suss it out,
Yeah,
to at least get satisfaction that it passes muster with Elkhorn.
Yeah, and
the
I think
reason why we're
we
doing
can do that
guidance-
later.
yeah.
Yeah,
later.
I think the reason why we're doing guidance right now is because statute is pretty clear. And we want to be adaptable, moving forward with this. We can do rules later, but this is a sort of a bridge to get there.
Yeah,
And somebody in a rural context is going to ask the question, I have a 2-track that gets me to my camp. Is that a driveway? And I think under this, the answer is yes, if it's constructed, right? I guess the definition of the word constructed has to be determined at some point.
After if it already exists right now and they don't do anything to improve it, it won't register for us. If they decide to improve that double track, that could be a question.
And then
Right,
it's
so-
going to be a question of, is it a class
Is it
4
maintenance?
road? Is
Yeah.
it maintenance?
Well, there's,
And so those are other things that we need to get to. I think Kirsten and I also had a conversation about that carve out for class 4s and what's maintenance versus improvements. And so that's another bucket that we want to discuss at a future date too. Absolutely.
Okay,
okay. Any more on roads and driveways?
So next time, maybe we'll try and tackle forestry and ag. We'll find another fun topic for next time.
yeah, maybe we could do maintenance at the same time. I think maintenance is fairly straightforward in my mind. There's a lot of old case law about conversion of roads, like from logging roads to development. So
Yeah.
there's guidance that already exists.
Okay. All right, we're a little bit early. Is that okay? Or do people feel like we have to use up every minute?
What time are we supposed to adjourn?
4:15.
I'll make-
Let me just ask Annette, do you have any comments you'd like to provide us before we adjourn? Are you walking your dog, Annette? All right. We'll see you next time, I guess.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Okay.
Brooke got it.
Any discussion? Okay, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Bye.
Aye.
Unanimous. We are adjourned. Thank you very much. See you all later.
Thanks, everyone.
So we have to